Namaskaram. Hello and welcome, hardworking individuals. You must be aware about the Trump's tariff on India, and India is forced to choose between USA and Russia. But what if I tell you the very same situation was there under the leadership of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru when India got independent? Because world then was divided into two parts. First world, USA. Second world, USSR and their allies. And India had to choose in between one of them. What did India and Prime Minister Nehru do then? India created its own path known as non-aligned movement. Yes, we are not going to go in anybody's lobby, rather we are going to go alone. And how these terms about the first world, second world, and third world erupt, what was exactly this Cold War, where the wars did not happen directly in between USA and USSR, but they made other countries fight among each other. What were the losses of India? What were the advantages? And what exactly happened? We'll also talk about the topics about the Suez crisis, the Hungarian crisis, the Korean War, and we'll see all those things. Along with that, we are also going to see about the other important facts related to it. Well, we have started this international relation classes with a very comprehensive nature. We have already done many classes. We have talked about India US relation, India Russia relation, India China relation, India Pakistan, India Bangladesh relation. We have also done an introductory international relation class which will help you if you are preparing for examinations. But the most important thing here is that if you really want to know about the international relations, about the world history, about the Indian history, you really need to subscribe for that. And if you want this PDF for free, this colorful PDF that you're seeing, if you want it for free, you can join our Telegram channel and there you will get it for free. And also, if you have any question, you can call on these numbers given below to any educator of Shikara Academy and you will be helped for free. And a very quick info, and then we are just going to start with our class. If you're preparing for TGPSC Group 1 and Group 2, right now we have just started our foundation batch. And this is the number here where you can call and inquire for more. And also, if you are interested and you're preparing for UPSC CSE 2026-27, then guys, this is the number here and you can enroll. These are going to be some very specific batches and specific classes where you're going to get everything related to your preparation. So you should not miss this chance. And let's get started with our today's class. Okay. So the overview when we talk about India's foreign policy during Prime Minister Nehru, somewhere around 1947 to 1964, we will see Nehru's approach was characterized by non-alignment, peaceful coexistence, and solidarity with developing nations at that time. Now, those first world, second world, third world, what we have already talked about, they are now no longer known as such. Rather, they are known as the developed nations, the developing nations, or the least developed nations. Okay. Now, the Nehru's doctrine that we are going to see, which will also shape the foreign policy of India at that time. So it will be based on few points. Number one, it will be on the non-alignment movement. So we are not going to go because there was this Cold War after the World War. The world was divided into two parts: USA and its allies, USSR and its allies. We thought to go alone, and that was the non-alignment that was chosen. Now, non-alignment was right or wrong? Today you can decide whether it was right or wrong, but at that time, whatever it was done for the sake of the nation, and obviously it was done for the betterment. Now, the second factor for Nehru's foreign policy was the Panchsheel, the five principle of peaceful coexistence that India had with China in 1954. Well, it did backfire. We will talk about that too. The third world solidarity, this we have already talked about, that the US and its allies were the first world, the USSR was the second world, and we were considered the third world, the other African nations and other Asian nations who were getting independence at that time, all that were part of it. and the anti-colonialism and anti-imperialism. Now, this was a lot more important because we were under the British, and that what we had faced throughout, it also shaped our foreign policy. Okay, now what was this non-alignment if we talk about? So India would not align itself with either Cold War bloc, that is not with the USA or the USSR. The policy allowed India to preserve its independence in international affairs and avoid being drawn into superpower conflicts. Okay, so we are not going to take, if we are supposing we are going to support any of the parties, automatically the other party will be against us. So we didn't wanted to do that. And this punch seal of the five principle of peaceful coexistence, it formulated in 1954 with China, where there were these principles like the mutual respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty, mutual non-aggression, mutual non-interference in the internal affairs, equality and mutual benefit, and the peaceful coexistence. If you are following the international relations of contemporary time, you must have seen that China is welcoming India amid the US tariff on India. So we are also seeing that the Russians are welcoming India as well. But at that time, this third world charity, Nehru championed the cause of newly independent and developing nations at that time. And he advocated their collective voice in the international affairs. And India became a leading advocate for decolonization and the racial equality globally. India actively supported independence movement across Asia and Africa, viewing colonialism as a fundamental injustice at that time. Now let's see what was this Cold War. I'll try to just brief you in very small so that you'll understand it. Basically, after the World War II ended, because of this ideological, military, and economic rivalry between the United States and the USSR, the world got divided. There was no hot war, there was no fighting, there were no weapons were used. Rather, there was a war of influence, war of propagandas, war of arms buildup, and proxy wars without direct large scale fighting between the two superpowers. So, as the background we have already seen, after World War, that's 1939 to 1945, two nations emerged as the superpowers. Before them, who were the superpowers? Britain and France were the superpowers, but now no more they were the superpowers. They have been thrown. USA champion of capitalism, liberal democracy and free market economy, and the USSR, Soviet Union, Russia back then was known as the USSR, and then it will be disintegrated. And the champion of communism, socialism and one party rule, the world European powers, that is the Britain, France, Germany, had weakened, living a bipolar world at that time. Now, the causes of the Cold War, if you see, first and foremost, the ideological differences, like USA followed capitalism, but USSR followed communism at that time. Mutual distrust, that is the USSR suspected US delayed opening the second front in World War II to weaken USSR intentionally, and US feared Soviet expansionism in Eastern Europe. The power vacuum after World War II, as we have already seen, collapse of Germany, Japan, Italy, both US and USSR tried to fill that vacuum. And nuclear weapons, like the US used atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and USSR developed its own nuclear bombs by 1949. So this also led to the arms race. Major features of the Cold War, if you see, bipolar world, USA, USSR, arms race, that is nuclear weapons, the submarines were there. The space race was also there. This was something you can say was very positive, where both the countries competing with each other did specific uh, progress in the space. And the military alliances, that was USA's NATO. Still, if you see, if you're watching the Ukraine and Russia war, Ukraine actually wanted to be part of NATO, and Russia feared that it should not be, and that is why what was the start of the war between Ukraine and Russia, and now it is prolonged for so long, which is not good. And USSR in return to NATO started the Warsaw Pact. That's also something that you should remember. So the key phases of the Cold War, if you see, it will start, and then there will be this different phases where there will be the changes in the USA and USSR thinking. There will be these phases where you will have the formation of NATO. You'll also have the Warsaw Pact coming up against the NATO. Then you will see the Hungarian uprising will be there. Berlin Wall will be built, separating the Germany's, the Cuban Missile Crisis that will happen. We are going to see that. And then the intent will be there where you will see a period of reduced tensions. Nuclear ban treaty will be signed in 1963, and then but still Vietnam War and USA China reapproachment influence the balance. And we'll see the second Cold War, that is in 1979 to 1985, Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. US boycotted Moscow and the Olympics. At that time, US President Ronald Reagan took hardline stance, that is the evil empire. And then the end of the Cold War in 1991. And why there will be this end of the Cold War? So Mikhail Gorbachev at that time introduced glasnost, that is the openness, and the restructuring at that time. And we will also see the fall of Berlin Wall and dissolution of USSR. USSR will be disintegrated in 1991, and that was the official end of the Cold War of that time. Impacts of the Cold War can be seen here. You will see division of the world at that time. You will see the nuclear arm race, space exploration, wars and human cost, and also the formation of non-alignment movement and the collapse of United USSR at that time, the Soviet nations. Okay, the first and the second world, by now you must have understood what was the first world, the USA and its allies. The second world, the USSR and its allies. And the third world were the countries like India, the few Asian countries, few African countries have just got independent, but they were not into the blocks of USA and USSR. Rather, they were in the non-alignment movement. Now, this is what we see here in detail about the first world, the second world, and the third world that is given here. But one thing which is very important for you to understand here is that now we no more use these words. Rather, in place of first, second, and third world, we use the words like the developed nations, the developing nations, or the least developed countries. And by the way, to go into the detail of these slides, you need to have the PDF, and we will provide you the PDF for free to you if you join our Telegram channel, and there it will be available for free. Next is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. Still it is there. So you can say the American countries founded founded on April 4, 1949 with the signing of the NATO or the Washington Treaty. Its headquarters is in Brussels and Belgium. It has been in the news recently, so it can be asked in the examinations. NATO's main goal is to safeguard the freedom and security of its member countries by political or military means. Now, this is very important. And the cornerstone of NATO is collective defense. If any member is attacked, it is considered an attack against all members. Article 5 of the treaty says that. And NATO was formed in the aftermath of World War II to provide collective security against the threat of Soviet expansion. And in 1955, the Soviet Union formed the Warsaw Pact as direct counterweight to NATO at that time. Okay, memberships, it was started with 12 founding members. The 12 founding members are given here. You must see there, United Kingdom, United States, Portugal, all are there. But now you can say it is expanding and it has 32 members right now. Next is the Korean War that happened in 1950 to 1953. So the Korean War was a major conflict of the Cold War era fought on the Korean Peninsula. It was fought between North Korea, which was backed by the Soviet Union and China at that time, and the South Korea. South Korea was backed by United States and the United Nations, mainly the US led forces at that time. There was this India's role also there. India adopted a mediating role during the Korean conflict. Despite initial support, India has also sent its medical staffs there to help them, and it advocated for China's admission to the United Nations at that time, and also successfully mediated the 1952 UN resolution that helped end the conflict at that time. And it also demonstrated that India was committed to peaceful resolution of international disputes. Now that is very important. So we saw in against of NATO, there was this Warsaw Pact. Warsaw Pact came into existence on May 14, 1955. It was signed between the Soviet Union and 7 Eastern European socialist republics like the Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Hungary, Poland, and Romania. And this was obviously in the very same lines of what North Atlantic Treaty Organization was. Okay, the headquarters were in Moscow, and its command structure was led by the Soviet officials at that time. So this is something that you should know. Next is the Hungarian crisis. After World War II, Hungary became part of the Soviet sphere. Okay, but what will happen after Stalin's death in 1953? You will see de-Stalinization speech in 1956, and it spread across the Eastern Europe. And after that, the student protest will happen in Budapest demanding freedom of speech with the withdrawal of Soviet troops and the democratic government. Next is the government change. Reformist communist Nagy became prime minister, and then Soviet response. At first, Soviet troops withdrew, but when Nagy declared Hungary neutrality and exit from the Warsaw Pact, the USSR decided to act, and then there will be this uprising that was crushed within days. And later on, we will see the Hungarian resolution exposed the limitation of non-alignment, while Nehru quickly condemned the Anglo-French intervention in the Suez Crisis. He remained notably silent for 3 weeks regarding Soviet intervention in Hungary. Now, this gave a sort of hint to the world that we were on Nehru at that time, because Nehru was representing India. We were inclined a bit towards the Soviet at that time. This differential response reflected strategic consideration regarding US Pakistan relations, India's limited leverage with the Soviet Union compared to Britain, and the inherent difficulty of non-alignment when both superpower acted aggressively. So sometimes you have to take a side. It was not possible that you can be non-aligned always. Next is the Suez Crisis. The Suez Canal, opened in 1869, was a vital waterway connecting the Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea, serving as the shortest route between the Europe and Asia. Though located in Egypt, it was controlled by the Suez Canal Company. And Canal Company was owned by whom? It was owned by the British and the French interest. In July 1956, the Egyptian president Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, intending to use canal revenue to fund Egypt's development projects like the Aswan Dam. Britain and France, who depend heavily on the canal for oil shipment, were furious, obviously, and then what they will do? Britain, France, and Israel secretly planned a military action against the Egypt. Israel attacked Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. Britain and France issued an ultimatum to Egypt, which was rejected, and they bombed Egyptian targets and later sent troops to occupy parts of the canal zone at that time. At that time, we will see that the US president, as an hour, pressured Britain, France, and Israel to withdraw. And also, the Soviet Union threatened force against the aggressor and supported Egypt. And because of this, we'll also see the United Nations called for a ceasefire and created the first ever UN peacekeeping force, United Nations Emergency Force at that time, to supervise the withdrawal. So that's how the Suez Crisis ended. And the consequences: Britain and France forced to withdraw in December 1956. Now, Israel withdrew in early 1957 but secured temporary freedom of navigation. And global compact marks a shift in world power. The US and USSR became the key players. Now, Britain and France are no more existing as the superpower, and strengthened Arab nationalism and anti-colonial movements at that time. Next, of the international relation or the world history that you should know, is the Berlin Wall. That was fortified concrete barrier divided Berlin from August 13, 1961 to November 8, 1989. It was built by the German Democratic Republic, that is the East Germany built it, to stop East Germans from fleeing to the West Berlin, which was under the control of Western allies. Okay, because they were getting more better opportunities there. That is why they were going there. So if you see the background where the post-World War II Germany and Berlin itself were divided into sectors, such as controlled by one of the four uh, allied powers. One was Soviet Union, United States, United Kingdom, and France. The flow of refugees from East to West Germany intensified in 1950, with millions escaping East Germany via West Berlin. And the structure and enforcement, the wall outstretched about 154 kilometers at that time, and it included concrete walls of a death strip with watchtower, barbed wire, anti-vehicle trenches, and floodlights, and armed guards ordered to shoot escapees. The fall of the wall also happened. Growing pro-democracy protests swept Eastern Europe in 1989. On November 9, 1989, East German officials announced that citizens could freely cross the border, leading to the jubilant crowds dismantling sections of the wall. Okay, so that was the Berlin Wall creation and the fall of the Berlin Wall. And then we will see the Colombo Conference of 1954. After the Korean War, Cold War tensions were rising in Asia. The US and its allies were forming military blocs, that is the SEATO and the CENTO, to contain communism. Asian leaders felt the need for an independent Asian voice. So participant countries who were there in this Colombo powers, or the sometimes called the Colombo Five: India and Jawaharlal Nehru was there, Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Bogra was there, Ceylon, we have Sir John Kotelwala, we have Burma, UNU was there, and Indonesia we have Ali Sastrom Dizo. Okay, so he was the PM at that time. Later, these five, along with other, laid the foundation of the Bandung Conference in 1955 and the non-aligned movement. So, what was exactly this non-aligned movement? Non-aligned movement is an internationally organization of the countries that choose not to formally align themselves with or against any major power bloc during that time, and particularly the United States led Western Bloc and the Soviet Union led Eastern Bloc. Okay, so this is what you should know. It traces roots to the 1955 Bandung Conference that we have already seen that happened in Indonesia. The movement was formally established in 1961 at the first summit in Belgrade, Yugoslavia, through the initiative of leaders such as Joseph Broz Tito, Jawaharlal Nehru, Abdel Nasir of Egypt, and we have Nkrumah of Ghana and Sukarno of Indonesia. Okay, what was the purpose and the principle of non-alignment movement? Promote national independence, sovereignty, territorial integrity, maintain neutrality and independence from the Cold War superpowers, support anti-colonialism, anti-imperialism, advocate for peaceful coexistence, aggression, and non-interference in the internal affairs, known as the Panchashil at that time. But there is a sad end to it. First, let's just see. NAM is the largest grouping of states after the United Nations, with currently over 120 member countries, mostly from Asia, Africa, and Latin America, part of it. It played a key role in decolonization process, and although the Cold War has ended, NAM continues to act as a collective voice for many developing nations. Okay, now I said you there was a sad end to it because in 1961 we had formally NAM constructed, and in 1962 there was this war between India and China, where China attacked India, uh, forcing. It was not foresaw by the Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, who had this punch seal in between India and China. And though there were news, though there were this. Intelligence report that China is going to attack India, but Nehru was so very confident on his relationship that he has built with China that he thought that never the Chinese are going to attack. But that was something which really made Nehru heartbroken, and it is also said that Nehru had that grief in his heart, and that led to his demise also very quickly. Nonetheless, the last topic that we are going to see today is the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, in very brief, if I say you, so Cuba, it came to the knowledge of USA that in Cuba, which is quite near to USA, USSR, Soviet, has placed some nuclear, okay, weapons. So at that time USA went to against it, and because USA went to against it, there were naval fleets of both USA and the naval fleets of USSR at that time. And then they come to a conclusion where they say that okay, USSR will take away the nuclear weapons from there, but first USA should take the nuclear weapons away from Israel at that time. Okay, so this is something that was kept secret also for most of the time. So basically, let's see the facts. The Cuban Missile Crisis, October 1962, was the most dangerous confrontation of the Cold War. One more thing that you should know here is China chose 1962 at that time for attack over India, because at that time both USA and USSR were busy fighting with each other in Cuban Missile Crisis, and that was also a reason why China chose that time to attack India. After the Cuban Revolution 1959, Fidel Castro came to power in Cuba, turning it into a communist state. Now, if it was a communist state, who it will support? It will support the Soviet Union. The US tried to overthrow Castro in the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. To protect Cuba and counter US nuclear missiles in Turkey and Italy, sorry, it was not Israel, it was Turkey and Italy where they have put the nuclear weapons. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev secretly placed nuclear missiles in Cuba at that time. Okay. Now the crisis, you'll see US spy plane U-2 photographed the Soviet missile sites in Cuba. Then the US President John F. Kennedy was briefed. He decided on a naval blockade, that is on October 16 to 22 it happened. Then October 22, Kennedy addressed the nation demanding the removal of Soviet missiles. October 24-25, Soviet ships approached the blockade but turned back, avoiding direct clash. And then we see on October 26, 27, that is the Black Saturday, Khrushchev sent letters offering to remove missiles if the US promised not to invade Cuba. It demanded US must also remove missiles from Turkey. And then we see that October 28, 1962, Soviet removed missiles from Cuba. US publicly pledged not to invade Cuba and secretly agreed to remove missiles from Turkey as well. So that was it for the Cuban Missile Crisis. And the political impact: US appeared victorious publicly since Soviet missiles left Cuba. Khrushchev faced criticism at the home, weakening his position, and a direct hotline, red telephone, was set up between Washington and Moscow to prevent future crises. Led to nuclear test ban treaty, that is in 1963 it will happen, to control the arms race and showed the dangers of brinkmanship in the Cold War. The timing of the Sino-Indo War coincided with the Cuban Missile Crisis. China likely calculated the superpower preoccupation with Cuba would prevent US intervention in support of India. And however, the swift resolution of the Cuban crisis allowed the US to provide military assistance to India during the border conflict at that time. Now, there was this nuclear test ban treaty in 1963, basically formerly known as the Partial Test Ban Treaty or Limited Test Ban Treaty, was a landmark international agreement to curb nuclear weapons. Okay, so the key details, if you see, August 5, 1963 in Moscow by the United States, Soviet Union and United Kingdom. Effective date was October 10, 1963. Participants initially the US, UK and USSR, later joined by over 100 nations. Notably excluding France and China. Provisions banned nuclear weapons test in the atmosphere, outer space and underwater. Permitted underground test as long as no radioactive debris across national borders. That is why you see all the nuclear test, mostly they are done underground, to protect human health and the environment from radioactive contamination and erase Cold War tensions and slow the nuclear arms race. Background and significance: if you see, the treaty marked the first significant stop toward the nuclear arms, which was really very important, and set a crucial precedent for later treaties such as the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Let's see a few questions very quickly, and if we have understood anything or not. So which of the following statement about the first and second world war during the Cold War is are correct? So first and second world, first world countries are aligned with the Soviet Union. No, this is wrong. First world was aligned with the United States. The second world countries with no, this is also wrong. So they have basically done what? They have exchanged each other. The first term, first world and second world, mainly referred to political and economic alliances. Yes, it was a political and economic alliances. The third world referred to countries not aligned with either the capitalist West or the communist East. Yes, that is also correct. So what should be the correct answer? The correct answer should be B, 3 and 4. Let's see what is the correct answer. Yes, that is the correct answer. If you want to see the explanation, you can pause the video, and also if you want the PDF of this classes for free, you can join our Telegram channel, and there you will get the PDFs for free. Also, if you have any questions related to any of the preparation strategies, you can call any of the educator on this number and talk to them. What was the primary purpose of NATO when it was founded in 1949? To promote trade between the US and Europe? No. To provide collective defense against the Soviet aggression? Yes. So B should be the correct answer here. Next question: the Warsaw Pact was established mainly as an alliance for promoting democracy. No. A peace treaty? No. Electric militia in the Soviet Union to counter NATO? This should be the correct answer, and that is the correct answer. Next, the Berlin Wall was primarily constructed to prevent Soviet troops from entering West and stop the flow of East German fleeing to the West Berlin. Yes, this is the correct answer. So C is the correct answer here. And the next and the last question: which of the following is true about the nuclear test ban treaty? It banned the nuclear test only underground. No, not underground was not banned. That was allowed. It was signed by the United States and the Soviet Union and the United Kingdom. No, there were others also. It aimed to reduce radioactive fallout from nuclear test. Yes, that's correct. It completely banned all nuclear weapon testing globally. No, it did not completely ban. It was signed by the, yes, this should be the correct. Okay, so 2 and 3 is the correct here. Okay, so yes, USA, USSR and UK were initially there. So B is the correct answer here. So with that, we have come to the end. But this can be a beginning for you if you are preparing for UPSC, TSPSC, APPSC for one-on-one live mentorship by Deepika ma'am, who is having 20 plus years of experience and who has guided almost hundreds of aspirants into the administrative services in both the State Public Service Commission and as well as in the Union Public Service Commission. You can call on these numbers to inquire for more. Please hit the like button and subscribe so that we meet again. Keep working hard. Namaskaram.